All right, so I'd really like to welcome you all to the Exploring Unseen Threats, Contaminant Trends and Impacts in Port Phillip Bay training webinar. Now, I'm Jackie. I'm a Senior Research Fellow with the Aquatic Environmental Stress Research Group at RMIT University, and I'll be taking you through today's webinar. So the session today will introduce you to the project. We'll outline our goals and the methods for the monitoring of contaminants, and we'll also then discuss your role in the project and in our important safety considerations for field monitoring. We also will have additional in-person training sessions on deploying and retrieving the samplers. And also in that, we'll go over detailed safety protocols while we're at a site. And we'll also, which we'll talk a bit more at the end of the webinar about those in-person training sessions and how you can join them. But now we'll kind of get started. So before we do begin the webinar, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters where this project will take place, and also the different places we're all gathering here from. I'm joining you from Wadawurrung country, and I do invite you to share which lands you are joining from in the chat if you'd like to. Before we also get into the webinar, I would like to introduce you to some of the other key members of our team that have joined today. So we have Monica, and these guys can maybe give a bit of a wave so you know who they are. So Monica is our knowledge broker at AQUEST, and she's been really instrumental in developing a lot of the communications and training materials and helping coordinate all these sessions. Pelasti, give a bit of a
hi everyone.
Wave. So Pelasti is our project chemist, and he's also a postdoc at RMIT, and so he's responsible for quite a lot of roles on the project, but importantly our sampler preparation and the chemical analysis of the samplers. Additionally, we have Jane here, who's from Melbourne Water and Estuary Watch. Jane, do you want to give a little wave there? She's at the moment not got her camera on. We have, I'm not sure if Alison has joined, but Tyler has joined from the Port Phillip Bay Eco Centre. Thanks for a wave there, Tyler. And we have Charlotte as well. If you want to turn your camera on at all, Charlotte. I'm not sure if Jane and Charlotte have heard. And Charlotte's with the Werribee River Association. And so these guys all form part of the project team. And so you'll get to know them throughout the project if you don't already know them. All right. So Port Phillip Bay is a highly valued environment, and socially it serves as a hub for community activities and recreation. Economically, it contributes significantly to the local economy through things like tourism and fishing and other marine-related industries. Environmentally, it is a vital ecosystem, being home to diverse ecological communities, unique habitats and aquatic life. However, the escalating pressures of population growth, urbanisation and industrial activities can pose significant threats to our bay. And these factors can lead to the introduction of contaminants into the bay's environments, which can potentially disrupt the delicate balance of this ecosystem. These contaminants can adversely affect the marine life. They can affect the bay's natural beauty and its recreational, cultural and economic values. So it's really important that we understand the occurrence and the types and also the distribution of contaminants so we can work towards solutions to protect and maintain the bay's assets. Now, what are contaminants and why do we want to monitor them? So contaminants are chemicals that can pose significant risks to aquatic environments, to ecosystems and to human health due to their toxic, persistent or bioaccumulation nature. So these chemicals can enter the environment through a lot of different sources, including human activities like industrial processes, agriculture. They can come from activities around your home, so from urban runoff, wastewater discharges, as well as natural processes. And today there's thousands and thousands of chemical contaminants in use, which could potentially be impacting our estuaries and our marine environments. So some key contaminants that we think about that could be present in our estuaries and bays include things like heavy metals, hydrocarbons, industrial chemicals, microplastics, pesticides, and many of the other things that are listed here on the slide. But what do we know about contaminants in both Port Phillip and Western Port Bay? So over the last 40 years or so, there have been several research and monitoring initiatives which have led to improvements in our understanding of contaminant risks in both of our bays. And you can see these studies listed up on the slide here. They include the Port Phillip Bay Environmental Study, which was done back in 1996, the science knowledge synthesis of nutrient cycling, marine pests and pollutants in Port Phillip Bay, which was in 2016. For Western Port, there's the Understanding the Western Port Environment report, which was completed in 2018. And then there's the State of the Coast reports, which sort of provides a more overview of each of our bays and the estuaries, and that the latest report for that was in 2021. Now, the latest reports, or the most recent for each of our bays, and also the State of the Coast report, and this is probably more so for Port Phillip Bay than Western Port, really still highlight that contaminants have not been monitored in the bay in a systematic way. And in many instances that their impacts on bay values have not been well characterised. The condition status around contaminants in the bay was considered fair, with data availability low in that 2021 State of the Bay's reporting. So really, at present, there's a lot of knowledge gaps regarding contaminant present in our bays remaining. So to be able to inform, risk-based management of our bay and protect, the biodiversity, the amenity, the cultural and social values, we do need to understand more about the occurrence and impacts of contaminants in these systems. And so that's where this project really fits in. So the project is funded by the Victorian Government's Port Phillip Bay Fund, but also there's a component which is a work in Western Port that is funded through Melbourne Water through a partnership that we have with them called the Aquatic Pollution Prevention Partnership. Now, the project overall aims to investigate the occurrence and impacts of contaminants from everyday activities in our estuaries and bays. And so by doing this, we can provide crucial data on priority contaminants and also areas of concern. And this will sort of enhance our understanding of marine and estuarine environments and help support effective management actions to protect and maintain their health. Now, the project will look at these contaminants by monitoring surface waters at various estuary and bay sites, and we'll screen them for over 40,000 chemical contaminants using innovative analytical methods. The monitoring will occur multiple times a year over a 3-year period, and this will provide insights into both the spatial and temporal changes in contaminant levels. During selected rounds, we will also conduct some toxicological assessments to evaluate the potential impacts on our flora and fauna. So overall, we'll be able to deliver valuable data on contaminants and their effects on bay health. Now, collaboration is a really big key to the project's success. And so we're partnering partnering with several organisations, which include Melbourne Water, Estuary Watch, the Port Phillip Eco Centre, the Werribee River Association, and also the National Measurement Institute, which is Australia's National Chemical Analysis Laboratory. We're also eager, though, to involve you guys, community volunteers, in the monitoring to allow you to learn about estuary and bay health and also contribute to the protection of these valuable ecosystems. So how is monitoring going to be undertaken? Well, as I mentioned, the monitoring program will assess contaminants in our surface waters of estuaries and the bays. And to achieve this, we'll be using these specialised sampling equipment known as passive samplers. And they're kind of shown in the middle two photos on this slide. So passive samplers are basically environmental monitoring devices, and they employ a collection medium, which is either like a filter paper or a powder. And this filter paper or powder accumulates chemical pollutants from the water over an extended period of time. Now, the method contrasts with just going and taking a grab sample, which just involves going at a point in time and taking a water sample, because the samplers are out over a long period, so they can capture like events that might come down, which if you take a single sample at one point in time, you might miss. So the passive samplers are submerged underwater for several weeks to months, during which time they absorb chemical contaminants. After that deployment period, they're retrieved and they're sent back to the lab where they're analysed to identify the contaminants that they've accumulated. For this project, we will use two types of passive samplers, and these are both shown in those middle two pictures. So we'll use a POCUS passive sampler, which is on the left, and we'll use a ChemCatcher passive sampler, which is on the right. Now, the ChemCatcher basically consists of like a thin paper-like membrane, whereas the POCUS sampler is a powder that's held between two porous filter membranes. Now, each of these samplers captures different types of contaminants based on the properties of those mediums. And by employing both these types, we can collect a more comprehensive data set on the types of contaminants that are present in the water. So in terms of the monitoring process, there's three key steps. And the first is the deployment and retrieval of these passive samplers. And this is where you guys as volunteers will play a really crucial role. So basically we'll have a group that's working at a site, and that might be from 2 people to a number of people. And someone in the group will receive the sampling kit containing the passive samplers and all the deployment equipment. You'll gather at the site, and what you'll do is set up the samplers into a protective cage, which is shown up the top there. And then you'll deploy them into the water at the designated site, which you can see me doing there. After 1 month, you'll return to retrieve the cage and the samplers. Now, the samplers should be unclipped from the cage. So you can see in those bottom pictures, that's some samplers after they've been deployed. So you can see they're a little bit fouled and quite a bit dirty. You'll take them out of the cage, you'll photograph them so that we can see what sort of condition they're in. Then they'll be wrapped into foil, placed into a labelled Ziploc bag. And so that'll have things like the site that it's come from, the sampler type, when it was deployed and when it was retrieved. And then the samples will be basically returned to us at RMIT for the subsequent steps. And so those subsequent steps are shown in this slide. So once the samplers arrive back to us at AQUEST, they undergo a processing step to prepare them for sending to the National Measurement Institute. So this step involves taking the membranes from the chem catchers or the sorbents from the POCUS and drying and preserving them for the further chemical extraction and analysis. And the circles on the left-hand side of this slide just show you those steps for the POCUS sampler or for the chem catcher passive sampler. When we're finished processing them, they're then sent to NMI in Port Melbourne, and that's where the contaminants that are absorbed by the samplers are extracted, and then they're analysed using an instrument called a liquid chromatography quadruple time of flight mass spectrometry. That is a big word, and it is a fancy instrument, and it's the one that's shown there in that picture. So this technology allows us to look for what we call a known list of contaminants. So they're things that we think will or could possibly be present in the waters, but it also allows us to compare to a library of up to 40,000 different chemicals. So these are unknown chemicals that we look at the site as well. Right, so we've sort of provided a summary of the project and the processes, and now I just sort of want to talk about your role as a volunteer in the project. So we do have many partners that are involved, and their roles and responsibilities are outlined in the training manual. But in terms of the roles for you guys as a volunteer, you will play a really vital role in the monitoring program by deploying and retrieving the passive samplers. And this is central to our efforts to effectively monitor and identify contaminants in our local estuaries and the bays. So as a member of a group working at an estuary, you will visit that selected estuary during monitoring rounds, and you'll learn to deploy and retrieve pre-prepared passive samplers. You'll learn to make site observations about estuary condition and surrounding land use that might be influencing what sort of contaminants we might see at a site. You'll upload attendance sheets, records, notes, and photographs from the sampling events. And you'll also be encouraged to participate in our pollution workshops, which we'll be holding 2 of later in the project, to talk about the data that's being collected and like what those findings mean and what sort of things we might need to sort of think about doing to address any issues that we might identify. Those pollution workshops would also be attended by industry and government as well. So all the scientific data that is collected by you guys would be summarised to assess spatial and temporal differences in contaminants across our estuaries and the bay. And this summarised data will be made available through the project website. And also it will be shared with local and state government organisations to help identify contaminants and areas of concern. And one of the key things is by assisting with that deployment and retrieval stages, like for volunteers assisting with that, you're enabling our staff to spend more time on the analytical side and looking at the data and sort of working out what that means and what we might need to do with it. So we can therefore process more samples, and that enhances the information that we can produce. So we'll have a more robust data set for management actions. Okay, I'd like to kind of move on now to talk more about the essential guidance to ensure that you guys are safe while participating in this project. And one of the key things is, you know, your safety is a top priority for us. So we want to make sure that everyone understands the risks and safety measures And to do this, the first step is attending this webinar today, where we'll cover key information to help you manage risks effectively. And then, so all these details that we discussed today will be outlined in the volunteer training manuals, and it is really important for participants to understand and follow the OH&S procedures we present today, as well as those in the manuals. Since the webinar is being recorded, you can revisit this information whenever needed. There will also be the attendance at hands-on training sessions at estuary sites, and this will be to learn more about the monitoring procedures using the passive samplers. And details on those planned sessions and registration we will share later in the webinar. But these sessions are really about ensuring you can handle the samplers safely, so that you collect quality assured data so we don't get contamination and that sort of thing, but also that you're being safe while doing those activities in the field. It would be really good before attending the hands-on training if you could familiarise yourself with the protocols for deploying and retrieving passive samplers, which are outlined in the field sampling protocol section of the training manual. And anyone that's registered for those hands-on training sessions, we will send out an electronic copy of the manuals prior to the training sessions for you to have a look at those. So we have prepared a general fieldwork risk assessment for the monitoring activities that form part of this project. And there'll be a copy of this in the appendix of the volunteer training manual, and hard copies provided in the field kits. Now, a risk assessment is something we do all the time for every activity that we're undertaking in the field or in the lab. And basically what they do is identify potential hazards you might encounter. They evaluate the associated risks with these hazards and outline measures to eliminate or control those hazards. We encourage everybody to read the risk assessment, and then during your site visits, engage in open discussions about the risks with your group before sampling. This will ensure everyone's aware of potential site-specific hazards that might be there. It is crucial that all participants understand the risks and the measures needed to mitigate them, and you will be asked to acknowledge that you understand the risk assessment when signing in for sampling. If you do have any questions or comments about the risk assessments, or you identify any hazards that we might have missed, please contact us and let us know. And you can do that through the website in the volunteer section. There's details how to contact us, or I've got a slide at the end with our contact details as well. The next part of the webinar, we will review the safety aspects that have been identified in the risk assessment, and we'll also go over general safety measures so that we can ensure a safe and enjoyable sampling experience for everyone that participates. So we'll start with the sort of standard safety procedures for field sampling. I would like to highlight that many hazards that are encountered during this work are consistent across the different sites, and mitigating them often does just involve common sense practices. Okay, so you might look at some of these and go, oh yeah, we should know that, but we just want to highlight them and talk about them. So as I mentioned, these are standard safety procedures to consider during field sampling. One of the most important is that given that you'll be working near water, we always use a buddy system. So we never sample alone. There needs to be at least 2 people on site when we're undertaking sampling. it's important to inform someone who is not in the field about your activities, so that if something happens and you don't turn up somewhere, someone goes, oh, what's happened to them? So you can then notify them once you've safely returned home after sampling. Generally, we will determine the sites for sampling, and we'll provide you details on where to deploy the samplers. But when you get to the site, you'll have to pick the perfect location to put them in. We do want you to only deploy at these approved locations, but if for some reason there's a need to relocate, we would like you to contact us beforehand so we can just discuss why that needs to be relocated. Our chosen locations are usually ones to ensure like safe access to the water and avoiding areas with things like steep banks or dense vegetation. We aim to deploy and retrieve samplers at low tide. And this is to ensure they remain submerged throughout the sampling period. So if the samplers come out of the water at any time during the 1 month, it can compromise the sampler's ability to take up contaminants. And also, we don't know how long it's been in or out of the water. So it is really important that they remain in the water the whole time. So if we go at low tide, we know we're putting the samplers in where they should remain, hopefully, even at really low tide in the water. We'll kind of select weeks when we're going to do the sampling rounds where hopefully the low tides will be sort of in the day time. And what you can do is when you're determining which day is best for you to go out in that sampling week, you can verify the conditions using things like the Willy Weather app. So you can go and look at the tides and work out what time is best to go. Now, if you ever can't safely retrieve a sampler, we want you to just leave it. And you can either return when you think it would be possible to retrieve it, or otherwise let us know and we'll come and retrieve it. And the last point on there, and a real key one, is that we do not want you to enter the water at any site. Accidents happen where someone might fall in. We hope that doesn't happen, but we don't want you to actively go into the water at any site to deploy or retrieve the samplers. So all activities should be conducted from the bank, and placing and retrieving samplers into the water should be done from a safe position on the bank. And as I just mentioned, if you can't retrieve the sampler safely, just leave it and contact us, and we will come out and try and retrieve it. Our first safety considerations really focus on travelling to and from your sampling sites. And this can be one of the more dangerous components of field work. So key hazards in terms of travelling to and from the site include things like traffic hazards. So this can involve things like conditions of vehicles, other road users, conditions of the road, that sort of thing. Driver fatigue is another key hazard. The transportation of equipment. You will be given field kits, and these could become loose items in the car. And items that you're also given, like things like a steel pole, could be things that are heavy to lift, and that could be manual handling kind of issue. Lastly, we can have weather hazards. So this could include things like fires. Hopefully you don't encounter them, but storms and flash flooding, and they are something we could possibly encounter. Now, to mitigate these sort of hazards, things to think about are like when you're in your vehicle, always wearing your seatbelt, avoid using your phone while driving, ensuring the vehicle that's being used is in good working condition. We don't want you to drive if you're tired, distracted, or under the influence of medications or alcohol. In terms of those loose items, so the field kits, it's good to secure them. So we want to make sure that if there was an accident, they're not going to become projectiles in the car. If items are heavy, we don't want you to lift them alone. Now, we don't think that the kits will be that heavy. They're pretty small. They're just a small plastic tub that contains the cage you'll deploy in, the wires and safety gear and instructions. Then there'll also be a small foam container that, or esky, that contains the samplers. And potentially some sites might have a small steel picket to go in. But when you are handling all this, we just want to make sure you're handling them safely. In terms of weather, it's really good to check the weather forecasts before going out, and we want you to postpone the trip if there's danger from things like fire or adverse weather conditions are predicted. If you're in the field and suddenly you encounter bad weather conditions and you're feeling unsafe, so maybe it's a lightning storm comes through, we just stop sampling. Okay, we can come back and get the samplers. All right, our next set of safety considerations really focuses on site safety and environmental hazards. And the key hazards and mitigation measures that we would encounter in this area include things like wildlife. So we could encounter snakes, spiders, bees, mosquitoes, and prickly plants at the site. And interactions with these could have very different consequences. To mitigate risks of encounters with these, one of the key things is probably about being aware of your surroundings. So when you're getting to the site, looking around, just checking there's not presence, like you're not seeing snakes as you're walking through the site, making sure you're being a bit noisy to deter them. We want to avoid things like long grass or dense vegetation areas where you just can't see. If you do see a snake, we abort sampling. Okay, just leave and we'll come back another time. In terms of mosquitoes, there are a number of mosquito-borne diseases around, so we wear mosquito repellent. We do when we do all our work. The other thing you can do to reduce mosquito risks is wear long sleeve, long pants clothing that's loose. One thing with repellent, though, we ask you need to apply it. So you arrive at the site, get out of the car, apply your repellent before you unpack the kit or do any of the sampling work, because we will pick that repellent up in our samplers. Okay, so we want to try and minimize exposure of the samplers to that. In terms of spiky plants, you just want to be, again, aware of what's around. And if you see a spiky plant, try and stay away from them. One of the key things for all wildlife for the protection is wearing long pants that are nice thick ones, long sleeves, sturdy boots will help protect against things like scratches, stings, and bites. It is possible you will do some sampling on days when we have high UV ratings. To sort of manage that, we can wear sunscreen, a hat. Again, your long pants, long sleeve clothing will help protect you from sunburn. Again, with the sunscreen, we want you to apply it as soon as you hop out of the car or before coming to the site, because we will be able to pick up the sunscreen in the samplers as well if you're handling them with sunscreen around. In terms of extreme weather, again, it's about planning our sampling days around weather forecasts so that we avoid working during storms, high winds, potential flash floods, and extreme temperatures. So we want to avoid doing our field work during peak UV times or again, those adverse weather conditions. You may encounter biological hazards while you're out. So this is things like E. coli and bacteria. they could be present in the water, and especially after storm events. We all know we get poor water quality in our bays and that after storm events. So really, to manage this risk, the key thing is wearing gloves. Okay, so you'll be supplied gloves in the kits. Make sure you're wearing them. Protects against this, but also protects our samplers from contamination. At the end of sampling, washing your hands with soap and water or using hand sanitizer at least is really important to reduce any risk to yourself. The last one on there is falling limbs. So we can, if we do have falling limbs, they can cause a very serious injury. The key thing with that is not parking or working under large trees, especially those that might have large long limbs, so things like our gums, and probably more prominent in windy conditions. You don't want to park under them. Luckily, we don't really have the river red gums down this way, so hopefully we won't have too many problems with that sort of thing. There's several physical site conditions which can present hazards while sampling, and these are outlined here. So the key ones are things like trip, slip and fall hazards. So this may include things like at these sites you'll have logs or unstable substrates. There's definitely going to be muddy surfaces, and there might be rubbish as well at some sites, hopefully not too many of them. So again, this is about being aware of your surroundings at the site before you are moving around. You want to avoid areas with lots of physical obstacles and opt for like safer access points. So steer clear of steep banks, areas with lots of logs you might have to climb over, that sort of thing. And it's just sort of being vigilant and aware while you're walking around to avoid these tripping and slipping hazards, and avoid climbing over objects. Wear appropriate work boots that have really solid, good soles that will grip well at sites is important. In terms of unstable or soft muds, as I said, because our sampling's at low tide, you are definitely going to encounter soft muds during this work. The key is avoid walking onto these surfaces, right? They may look good, they're generally not. If you go on them, it is possible you will slip or sink and become stuck. So you can test the ground with a stick for a bit of firmness, but we would really heavily advise to just not walk on those areas. We want to find a location where you can secure and place the sampler in the water without needing to walk on the actual soft muds. And I have actually experienced getting stuck in those before. The last one on there is sharp objects. So we could have broken glass or items like syringes present at sites, especially in areas where we do see some rubbish. And this can pose risks of illness or injury. We really would just say avoid picking up any sharp objects or rubbish. Okay, you are given gloves, but they are latex gloves. If they're sharp objects, just don't touch them. But be aware and make others aware they're there. The other thing is wearing your solid closed-toe work boots means that your feet should be fine walking over areas where you may not be able to see everything. A lot of these we've sort of covered off in some of the other slides, but I suppose a key thing to mitigating a lot of the hazards that we've talked about involves wearing appropriate clothing and using suitable safety equipment. So when we're in the field, it's always important. Long pants are a must. Long sleeves, if you're okay with that. Sturdy boots that are closed toe, no sandals. So they can be gum boots, they can be work boots, runners, but just closed toe shoes that have a good sole that will hopefully not be slipping. You might want to bring additional weather protection if it's predicted to be raining, so like a rain jacket. For sun insect protection, we want a hat, sunscreen, and repellent, but again, really important to apply these before touching or doing anything with the samplers. You want to always wear gloves when handling and collecting samples, and this both prevents contamination of the samplers, but also prevents exposure to things like biological materials. Extra things you might want to bring, as I mentioned, a raincoat. You might want to bring a towel and potentially some spare clothing just in case you slip or get wet. This is our last slide on the safety, and it's really around that first aid and site hygiene. Now, in terms of first aid kits, we won't be providing them, but if you do have one, it's a really good thing to have in your car in case there are minor incidents that happen. Another good thing to sometimes include is a snake bandage. They are specific for wrapping up if that does happen, although we've never had any instance of that. And that one you would carry with you while you're walking around the site if you have one. Having a charged mobile phone accessible is important to contact help if needed. In terms of hygiene and illness prevention, if anybody shows any signs of illness and you're not feeling well, please don't come to a sampling session. We don't want to make anyone else sick as well. After sampling, it's always important to wash your hands with soap and water or use hand sanitizer, especially if you're planning on a picnic or something after doing the sampling. Having a water bottle with you is really good for staying hydrated. And one other point we have there is we'd really ask all volunteers or anyone sampling to please refrain from smoking during sampling activities because cigarettes do contain a number of different contaminants, and even if you're not just from touching but from breathing on the samplers, we'll pick up those contaminants. This one, the point about footwear is probably more if you're going between sites or planning on doing a hike or something else after sampling. We do have some soil pathogens in some areas, so it's good if you can make sure your shoes, the soles of them are clean before you're going to other sites or locations if you plan to do that. Look, overall, we want to encourage all volunteers to take personal responsibility for their safety and for your groups. If there is a serious incident at a site, don't call us, call 000, okay? And then when it's safe to do so and things are sorted, then please let us know, okay? All right, that's probably the key safety stuff, and I know it's sort of a little generic, some of it, but it really is important to talk about and to think about. This slide is just about our in-person training. So we will be conducting hands-on training sessions to go over with everybody how to handle, deploy and retrieve the passive samplers. The sessions will be held on, we've got 2 sessions on Saturday, the 14th of June, one in Koroit Creek Estuary in the morning and one at Kannanook Creek Estuary in the afternoon. And then we have one on Tuesday, the 17th of June at Werribee River Estuary. We've tried to place these at different places around the bay. We can't go to every estuary, unfortunately, to do training sessions. So we're hoping that people from estuaries closest to these spots can come to there for the training. You can book to attend these sessions on our website in the volunteer resources section. In future rounds, we will have further training sessions on ground. These would probably will be at different estuaries to those ones, and you'll be able to access information for them on the volunteer resources section, and they'd be put out before we're doing subsequent sampling rounds. We do require at least one team member at each estuary site to complete the training, and this is just to ensure that someone in the team knows how to handle the samplers properly to maintain sample quality, because if they are held incorrectly or deployed incorrectly, it could compromise the data collected. The sampling protocols are provided in the volunteer manual, and we will basically be going over those step by step in those hands-on training days, as well as going over the safety aspects at site. All right, I just wanted to finish off with providing some information on the next steps of the project. So we're going to have those hands-on training sessions, and at those we'll work out roughly who's going to be associated with different sites, and we'll get a feel for who might be happy to be like a site coordinator, and that's just basically someone that is going to receive the kit. So we'll coordinate with them to drop off the kits and get the kits back to us, and we'll have that person probably responsible for uploading all the data from the collection days. This round that's coming up, we're looking to drop off kits around the 23rd of June, and then have deployment commencing from the 24th of June. And you'll have sort of a 1 week period we'd like to get the samplers deployed in. And then we'll be looking at retrieval during the week of the 24th of July. And so similarly, in that week, over that week, we'd like people to try and retrieve the samplers and get them back to us. Following that, our next rounds of sampling will be looking at around September, October this year. And participation doesn't mean you have to be at every event, every deployment and retrieval. We just love any assistance that volunteers are happy to provide with the project. All right, that's kind of it. Thank you all for coming along to this session. You can always find out information about the project on our website, or if you're associated with the Port Phillip Eco Centre, Werribee River Association, or the Estuary Watch groups with Melbourne Water, you can always contact Tyler, Charlotte, Jane as well, and come that way. Otherwise, my details and Monica's details are up there for you to be able to contact us if you have any questions, queries, or our details are in the manual. So if there's any issues on site too, you can always contact us while out sampling as well. But I'll open up the floor for any questions now. So Mon, were there any questions in the chat?
No, the chat has been quiet once all of the teething issues got worked out. Charlotte has her hand up though, so go ahead, Charlotte.
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie, for a really comprehensive presentation. We have dredging starting in the estuary in the next week or two, and that's going to continue for 4 weeks. Should we note that down as part of the sampling, or is that just accounted for as part of what's happening in the estuary?
No, that would be great that sort of thing important to note down, and that's not things that we would know about, because you guys are more associated with your local estuaries, so you know what's going on in them. So they're the important things to note down. That's going to be in the lower estuary, isn't it?
Yes, it will be in the estuary mouth, but obviously that'll impact what's traveling up and down with the tides. So yeah. So that's a really important thing. That's the sort of thing when you're sending in notes,
during your sampling days, if you know about those sort of things, putting them in there, because yes, they could definitely influence contaminants in the systems. For each of our sites, we will be in this round. So we've done one round of sampling in December, January last year, this year. And those results will be coming out mid this year, soon, hopefully. We've been concentrating on getting all our training things going first, and then I'll be going back and looking more at the data. But we'll be doing the sampling this round at the same locations we did last time, which is basically the top of the estuary in each location. And the top of the estuary is sort of where the freshwater and marine waters interface. So therefore, that's where we generally would see the highest levels of contaminants. And usually as we move down, you see lower. Some estuaries will be a bit different if they're bigger. So things like the Werribee, the Yarra, the Maribyrnong will be very different to little estuaries like Cherry Creek, or even things like Cannonook and that are a bit smaller in size. So, yeah. Are there any other questions? Yeah, Tony.
Hi. Just in the list of estuaries that were sent out in one of the emails, I live down at Blairgowrie, and obviously I'd want to work at the closest estuary to me, and the only one I'm certain about is Cannonook, but there are a couple that I weren't familiar with, and I'm not sure where they are. Like Chinaman's Creek was one of them, and Sheepwash Creek.
Yes, they're much closer to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Chinaman's Creek is sort of on Rye foreshore.
Capel Sound.
Yeah. In Capel Sound. Yeah, much closer. And Sheepwash, I think, is Dramana coming back from Dramana Macrae. Is it Macrae first? No, what's
Mount Martha? Yeah, is it?
Oh no, down from Mount
Safety Beach.
Yeah, Safety Beach. Thank you very much.
Okay,
I should
great.
know.
Okay. Okay, terrific. Thank you for that. That's good. So there are more local ones. I'm happy to go anywhere, but I just wasn't sure where they were.
Yeah, we do have, I just at this stage had put earmark Cannonook because we had quite a few people registered for the estuaries more so around there. But down the track we could have something. I know the rangers at Capel Sound are keen to be involved, and they helped in the first, well, they came out in the first round of sampling. So yeah, they're happy to help out as well, but I don't know whether they're going to be able to make it up to Cannonook.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yes, I've got one question.
Yeah, Jeff.
And I'm associated with Balcombe Estuary. Our berm spends a lot of time closed, so the low tide aspect is probably not so relevant for us. But the site that we used for the trial, which is at the picnic ground, I'm presuming we'll be using that again because I see it's pictured on the training manual.
As you are.
And so am I. But I have never seen it completely dry there. There's usually at least about 500 mil of water, but I've also seen well over 500 mil over the top of the jetty. So we can access it even if that's the case. So I don't see a problem with that. But I'm just thinking in terms of being, we would definitely note the situation at the berm as we do currently for our water testing for Melbourne Water.
Yeah, that'd be great. There will be some sites like that, you know, where estuaries get closed. Sometimes Merrick's is another one. Sometimes that ends up closed. So the water levels aren't going to change. It's actually easier when the water levels aren't going to change than when we do have a tidal one, because the way we have the range in tides, sometimes those real low tides could present an issue. But we'll see how we went all right in the first round. They all stayed underwater, which was good.
Yes, once we retrieved it, that's right.
Yeah, well, yes, you had some issues. That's right. But we did get it.
Situation. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Tony, you've got your hand up again.
Or have you just not?
Or is it just left up?
Maybe.
Did anyone else have any questions? We do encounter some issues at sites. As Jeff mentioned, we had a sampler kind of moved at Belcombe Estuary last time. A key thing we'll talk about when we're in the on-ground training sessions is we do need to try and put the samplers in places that are a little bit hidden, because we do, if they're visible, we do have people often just like interested in what it is, and they might pull it out and not put it back in or move it around. So we do sometimes have to, at sites, look around and really try and find somewhere that's a little bit hidden, but you'll be able to find easily on return.
Well, we do have some access platforms a bit further upstream if you wanted to consider that, but probably beyond access to the salt water.
Yeah, we do want to be in the estuary, not the fresh sections. Yeah. But at that site, we could potentially look at whether there's another spot we can tie off that's a bit safer.
I think if we tie it off very inconspicuously, it could solve that problem.
Yeah.
Jane, how are you? You're on mute.
Oh, do seem to be. Well, we can't hear you. No, now you're on mute.
No, I'm not. I've had.
We can hear you.
I've had microphone issues today for some reason. I was just going to comment that one of the things that will be really useful for volunteers to do is to just periodically go and check on the samplers to make sure that they haven't been tampered with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just in case.
And they are labelled and everything, but that doesn't deter some people. So, yeah, if you're ever around where it is and can go and check, that's always great. Yeah. And also that can check if it hasn't sort of washed up. But our last sampling round, everything seemed to stay, which was really good. There are no other questions or queries. Again, if anybody has anything that they think of after the session, please feel free to give us an email about it and we'll get back to you. Otherwise, hopefully everybody's registered for one of the in-person training sessions that we'll be holding, and you can ask questions. There'll be plenty of time for questions at those as well. All right.
Yep. Happy for an email if anyone needs any information. Good.
All right. Well, if no one does have any more questions, I'd just like to thank you again for all joining us for this session. We will be putting the recording up on the volunteer section of the webpage, so it's there to go back to if you want to. But otherwise, we look forward to meeting you in person at field sites.
Yep.
In a week or so for some.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
See you.
Thank
you.